The Mafia Heir declared himself my new partner and arrived with armed guards. The kingdom of Valdoria stretched beneath a sky always tinged with the color of storm clouds. Towering citadels rose like jagged teeth against the horizon, and the streets below whispered with the secrets of the powerful.
Magic lingered here, subtle and dark, threading its way through the bloodlines of kings and nobles, shaping destinies with invisible hands.
In one such corner of the kingdom, far from the glittering courts, the estate of House Valerian stood, quiet yet proud. Elara Valerian walked the halls of her family home with careful steps. The weight of responsibility pressed on her shoulders, but she carried it with a grace that belied her years. Her family's wealth and influence had been inherited, but so had its debts. Debts whispered about in hushed tones, owed to powers too dark for most to name. Among them was the Marzani clan, a dynasty feared across Valdoria. Brown and Dispatch were told as warnings to children, how they could strike without mercy, how their eyes could see through lies, and how their heir, the one who would inherit all, was said to hold a shadow of something otherworldly. Elara had heard those stories, of course. Everyone had. But fear and fascination had always walked together in her heart, and the Marzani name stirred a strange current of both. She had never met the heir, never even glimpsed him, but she felt, in some deep and unreasoning part of herself, that he would change everything. The first sign came one gray morning when the estate gates shuddered under the weight of unfamiliar riders. Elara's heart quickened. Guards approached, their armor black as storm clouds, and at their center rode a figure taller than any man she had ever seen. Cloaked in dark fabric that seemed to absorb the light, his presence was magnetic, chilling, and yet undeniably compelling. "I am Kael Marzani," the man announced, his voice low and steady, carrying over the courtyard like a command. "I have come to declare myself your new partner." Elara's brow furrowed, and for a moment she laughed, sharp and incredulous.
Partner? I do not know you, and I am quite capable of handling my own affairs.
Kael's eyes glinted, dark and unreadable.
I am aware. That is precisely why I am here.
Your family's debts are my concern now, and my presence will ensure they are met in full. There was an undeniable weight to his words, a gravity that demanded attention. Elara felt it settle into her bones, making her aware of the fragility of her position. Her family had tried to manage the debt quietly, avoiding the eyes of the Marzani clan, but Kael's arrival made it impossible. He did not ask, he did not negotiate. He declared. Breaths. "Very well," she said, though her voice was steadier than she felt. "If you are to be my partner, understand this. I will not be bullied, and I will not be made weak. Whatever agreement exists, it will be mutual." Kael tilted his head slightly as if amused. "Mutual, yes, but understand there are consequences for defiance." He gestured to the guards behind him. "I do not threaten. I state fact." The air grew tense. Even the birds seemed to pause in the garden beyond the walls, braced, calculating risks and possibilities. She had always been clever, quick with her wits and her words, but she had survived political maneuvers in the court before, though none as personal as this. She would not be intimidated by fear alone. Yet, beneath her resolve, a small, undeniable spark of curiosity ignited. Kael Marzani was more than a mere man. There was a strange aura to him, a presence that suggested secrets beyond the ordinary, something otherworldly lurking behind the sharp lines of his face and the cold intensity of his gaze. Days passed, and Kael did not leave. He claimed chambers in the estate and moved through the halls with an authority that was impossible to ignore. He watched, studied, and spoke little, yet every word carried weight. He seemed to know things things that should have been private, things about her family that could only have been discovered through methods far beyond ordinary means.
Alara felt the walls of her carefully controlled life begin to shift.
Where she had once been certain of her independence, now she felt the edges of her world blur. She found herself watching Cale as much as he watched her, noting the way his eyes flickered with hidden thought, how his silence seemed to listen to more than just her words. One night she ventured to the balcony that overlooked the estate gardens. Moonlight spilled over the courtyard, casting long shadows. She thought she was alone, yet Cale appeared silently at her side, as if the darkness itself had carried him there. "Why do you stay?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fluttering of her heart. "Why involve yourself in my life when so many others seek to keep their distance?"
Cale's gaze lifted to the horizon. "Because some debts are not merely numbers on a ledger," he said.
His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. "Some debts are woven into the blood itself, and some must be repaid in ways beyond understanding." Alara shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of his words. There was a depth to him, a darkness that hinted at pain and power intertwined. Yet within it there was a strange magnetism, a pull she could not deny. In the days that followed, Cale began teaching her in subtle ways the methods of the clan's influence: observation, calculation, and negotiation. He tested her wit, her courage, her patience. Their exchanges were battles of intellect and instinct, and though Alara resisted, she found herself drawn to the rhythm of their power struggle. Every glance, every unspoken challenge seemed charged with energy that went beyond the ordinary. One evening, a messenger arrived with news of a rival family seeking to claim what the Marzani had decreed theirs. Cale's face darkened. "They will come," he said. "Come, yet certain."
And we will be ready. Alara felt her pulse quicken. She was aware now that this partnership was no mere arrangement of money and influence.
It was a delicate dance with danger. She had accepted him as a partner, but the risks were far greater than she had imagined. The Ka family arrived. Alara wandered the halls again, unable to sleep. She felt the weight of history, of magic, and of fear pressing in. When she reached the grand staircase, she found Cale standing at the top, arms crossed, gazing into the darkness beyond the estate walls. "Why do you watch the shadows?" she asked. Cale did not turn. "Because the shadows speak," he said. "And sometimes they call your name." Alara's heart skipped. The words were not merely metaphorical. They seemed alive, vibrating with a reality she could not fully grasp. For a moment, she imagined the shadows moving, reaching toward him, whispering secrets she could not hear. She realized then that Cale Marzani was unlike anyone she had ever known. He was power, danger, and mystery all at once. And though she had promised herself to resist, a part of her, small but insistent, longed to understand him, to walk alongside him into whatever darkness lay ahead. As the first light of dawn brushed the estate in silver, a distant horn sounded. Alara and Cale both turned toward the gates, where the rival families' forces were gathering. Their eyes met, unspoken understanding passing between them. They were partners now, bound not only by duty, but by the fragile electric tension of trust and anticipation. Cale's voice broke the silence, low and certain. "They think us weak. They will soon learn we are far stronger than they imagine." Alara's hand brushed against the railing, fingers trembling slightly. "And if we fail?" Cale's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "Then we do not fail alone." The wind carried the first whispers of battle through the estate grounds. The shadows seemed to lean closer, listening, waiting. And somewhere within the darkness, Elara felt a name whispered back to her, carried on a current she could not see. Chaos. She understood then that nothing in Valdoria would ever be the same. This was only the beginning. And as the distant drums of war echoed through the valley, she realized with a mixture of fear and anticipation that the man who had arrived with armed guards, declaring himself her partner, might also be the key to a destiny she had never dared to imagine. The morning sun rose over Valdoria with a pale, uncertain light, filtering through clouds that seemed to hang like smoke over the kingdom.
Elara Valerian woke to the distant clatter of armor and the soft murmur of Kael Marsani's guards preparing for the day.
The first night of their uneasy partnership had passed without incident, but the air was thick with tension, as if the estate itself were holding its breath. Elara dressed in quiet contemplation, adjusting the simple yet elegant garments that allowed her both freedom and authority. She had never been a warrior, but in the last 24 hours, she realized that survival in Kael's world required more than wealth and wit. It demanded courage, cunning, and a willingness to see the unseen. Kael appeared in the main hall as the sun broke through the clouds, tall and silent, his presence filling the room with the weight of unspoken power. His gaze met hers, dark and intense, and for a moment Elara felt the strange pull she had sensed from the very beginning. It was a mixture of dread and fascination, a tension that made her pulse quicken even as she tried to hide it. "Today we begin properly," Kael said, his voice calm yet commanding. "Breath. If we are to succeed as partners, you must understand the rules of this world. Knowledge is power and hesitation is weakness." Elara lifted her chin. "I have survived courts and rivals before. I am not inexperienced." Kael inclined his head slightly, as if acknowledging her defiance. "Good. Then we will begin where most would fail. In the shadows, where truth is hidden and danger waits in every whisper." Past corridors lined with portraits of stern ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow their every move. He spoke of the Marzani clan, of their history, their influence, and the curse that had long haunted their bloodline. Elara listened carefully, noting every detail, every nuance in his tone. Kael did not speak often, but when he did, his words carried weight, revealing a depth she could not ignore. "You fear nothing," Kael said suddenly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Yet fear is the most honest guide you have. It shows you where danger lies, and where desire hides."
Elara frowned.
Desire? She did not understand what he meant, yet a shiver ran through her. She had never experienced anything like Kael, his power, his presence, and the way he seemed to see into the parts of her that she kept hidden from the world. The day passed in a blur of lessons and observation. Kael tested her mind, her intuition, and her courage. He placed her in situations that demanded quick thinking, teaching her to read the expressions of allies and rivals alike.
Elara discovered that she was sharper than she had believed, and Kael seemed to notice. There was a faint flicker of approval in his eyes, a rare acknowledgement that she was more than mere prey to the shadows of his world.
By evening, the tension between them had grown palpable. They were no longer simply partners in duty. They were partners in a dangerous dance, each step measured, each word charged with unspoken meaning.
Elara felt her own heart thrum with a mixture of fear and curiosity, realizing that Kael's presence had changed the rhythm of her life. A sudden commotion in the courtyard drew their attention.
The small group of masked figures had infiltrated the estate's outer grounds, clearly testing their defenses. Kael's guards moved with silent precision, surrounding the intruders, but Kael himself stepped forward, commanding the situation with authority that was almost hypnotic.
"Elara,"
he said, his voice low and steady. "Observe. Learn." From her vantage point, she watched Kael move like a shadow, precise and controlled. He confronted the intruders without haste, and in moments the threat was neutralized. Yet it was not just his skill that captivated her. It was the quiet confidence, the way he seemed untouchable yet disciplined, like a force of nature held in check by sheer will. First. Afterward, Cale led her to the gardens, where the evening air was cool and fragrant with blooming night flowers. The tension of the day hung between them like a tangible thread, and for the first time, Elara allowed herself a moment of reflection. She realized that she had not only survived the day, but she had also grown stronger, braver, and more aware of the unseen currents of power around her. "You have potential," Cale said, his voice softer than usual. "Breaths. Stronger than you realize. But strength alone is not enough. Trust, cleverness, and timing are equally important." Elara met his gaze, searching for a hint of what lay beneath the surface. "And do you trust easily?" she asked, her tone measured but curious. Cale's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. "Trust is a luxury few can afford. I trust because I must, not because it comes naturally." The admission hung between them like a delicate thread. Disparity of role material, a crack in the armor of the man she had both feared and admired since his arrival. It was subtle, almost hidden, but enough to make her heart quicken. Brash. Days turned into weeks, and the partnership deepened. Elara learned to anticipate Cale's moves, to read his subtle cues, and to act with precision in moments of danger. Their bond was forged not only in necessity, but in the quiet understanding that each could rely on the other in ways neither had anticipated. Yet the shadow of the Marzani curse lingered. Breaths. Cale's nights were restless, his mood shifting unpredictably. Sometimes he would disappear into the estate's deepest corridors, speaking to shadows that seemed to move on their own. Elara often followed, drawn by curiosity and concern, only to find him alone, staring into darkness as though he could see something beyond the mortal world. One night, she finally dared to ask, "What haunts you, Cale? What are you afraid of?" He turned to her, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "It is not fear," he said quietly. "It is the curse that binds my blood. It grants power, yes, but it takes more than it gives. It isolates. It demands." His voice trailed off, and for a moment he seemed fragile, almost human in a way she had not seen before.
Elara stepped closer.
"Then let me share the burden," she said softly. "We are partners, are we not?"
Cale studied her for a long moment, the darkness in his eyes deep and unreadable.
Inspiration. Then, without a word, he placed a hand lightly on hers. The touch was brief, but it sent a shiver through her. In that instant, she understood that their connection was no longer just about duty. It was something more, something neither of them could fully define yet. Their partnership was tested soon after, when news arrived of an attack by a rival clan seeking to exploit the Marzani's perceived vulnerability. Cale moved swiftly, and Elara found herself in the midst of strategy meetings, overseeing preparations and even venturing into danger alongside him. She realized that she had come to trust him, not just his power, but his judgment, his instincts, and, unknowingly, his heart. The confrontation was inevitable. Under the cover of night, the rival clan attempted to breach the estate walls. Elara, armed with knowledge Cale had taught her, anticipated their moves and directed the guards with precision. Cale moved through the battlefield like a shadow, neutralizing threats with calculated strength and skill. Perfective. They were a perfect balance. Her cunning, his power, their combined presence enough to repel the attack. After the skirmish, Elara found Cale standing alone in the courtyard, bloodied but unbroken. She rushed to his side, her heart pounding with fear and relief. He looked at her, a mixture of exhaustion and admiration in his gaze. "You did well," he said, his voice low. "Better than I expected." Elara shook her head, a small smile on her lips. Breaths. We did well together. Kale's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Together, he repeated, and in that single word there was an unspoken acknowledgement of trust, partnership, and something more. A connection neither could yet name, but both felt. That night Ilara could not sleep. She wandered the estate, restless with thoughts of the day and the bond she felt growing between them. When she reached the balcony, she found Kale already there, standing beneath the moonlight. He did not speak at first, only observed the shadows. Then, slowly, he turned his gaze toward her.
You are different from the others, he said quietly.
You see more. You understand more. And yet, his voice trailed, heavy with unspoken meaning. Ilara stepped closer, heart beating fast. Yet what? Kale's eyes met hers, glowing faintly with emotion.
Yet the world will test you in ways you cannot imagine. And I, he paused, as though struggling with words he rarely spoke.
I will stand with you whether you wish it or not. Ilara felt a shiver of anticipation and fear. The darkness of Valdoria was vast and merciless, and yet, for the first time, she did not feel entirely alone. And then, in the quiet of the night, the first whisper came, a distant warning carried on the wind. The rival clan had left a message etched in shadows across the estate gates. Break your loyalty, or the curse will consume what you love most. Ilara's hand trembled as she read the words, and Kale's eyes darkened with a dangerous fire. They both understood without speaking that the days ahead would demand more than courage. They would demand trust, sacrifice, and the strength to face the darkness together. The dance of power and desire had only just begun, and neither could predict where it would lead. The sun rose over Valdoria in pale streaks of light, struggling to pierce through the heavy clouds that seemed to linger over the kingdom like a warning. The estate of House Valerian, once calm and orderly, had become a place of quiet tension. Ilara walked through the halls, her thoughts tangled with the recent events. The skirmish with the rival clan, Kale's rare admission of trust, and the whispered warning etched in shadows across the gates. Breath. She could still feel the weight of Kale's hand on hers that night, the brief touch that had left a tremor in her chest. It was more than physical. It was a silent promise of protection and connection. And yet the warning had gnawed at her, a reminder that darkness lurked not only outside the walls but in every choice they made. Kale entered the hall, his presence as commanding as ever. But today, something was different. His usually calm eyes flickered with a tension she had never seen before. Prepare yourself, he said quietly. Today we uncover truths hidden long before either of us existed.
Ilara's curiosity sharpened. She followed him silently, noting how the servants and guards instinctively gave way, sensing the weight of his presence.
They entered the Marzani wing of the estate, a section few were allowed to enter, lined with ancient tapestries depicting battles and rituals from centuries past. Kale paused before a massive wooden door engraved with symbols that seemed to hum with energy. He traced the carvings lightly with his fingers. This is where the curse began, he said, breath. Long before my birth, before my ancestors took power, a betrayal occurred here, a pact was made, and a shadow was born. Psst. Ilara's breath caught. A curse? She asked. Breath. How does it affect you? Kale's gaze darkened.
It gives strength, yes.
But it binds me. It isolates me. Psst. I cannot love freely, cannot trust fully, without consequence. The bloodline carries a legacy of power and pain intertwined. And now, you are entwined in it as well. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. She had suspected the curse, the whispers, the strange aura that surrounded him. But hearing it confirmed made it real, tangible. Then why? Why allow me in? She asked, softly. Braith. Why partner with me if the danger is so great? Kael's lips curved slightly, a rare shadow of a smile. Because you are unlike the others. You see, you endure, and you do not falter. You challenge me and understand me in ways no one else has. And perhaps, because some part of me believes you can survive the darkness without being consumed. Prospect. The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning. Elara felt both fear and something else, something she had not dared to name. A connection that defied logic and reason, binding them together in ways that were as thrilling as they were terrifying. Their study of the curse continued in secret. Kael revealed fragments of the legend, a spirit of vengeance that had been bound to the Marzani bloodline, punishing those who allowed weakness or betrayal. Only a rare act of trust or an unselfish choice could appease it. Elara realized then that the stakes were not merely political. They were personal, spiritual, and potentially eternal. Brace. Days turned into nights of whispered conversation and quiet observation. Elara learned to read Kael's moods, to sense when he was restless or troubled, and to anticipate his movements with an almost instinctive understanding. And Kael, in turn, revealed fragments of himself, a glimpse of the man beneath the feared Marzani heir.
Yet the shadows were never far.
Rival clans plotted in the kingdom seeking to exploit any sign of weakness. Elara and Kael's growing bond did not go unnoticed. Letters arrived, threats scrawled in ink that seemed to shimmer with dark magic. Spies lurked in the streets, and even the loyalest of servants could not always be trusted. Every step they took required strategy, patience, and sometimes sacrifice. One evening as twilight descended and the estate was bathed in soft orange light, Kael led Elara to the highest tower, Braith's. From there, the kingdom stretched beneath them, vast and mysterious, filled with secrets both known and hidden. Look carefully, he said. The world is full of illusions. What you see is rarely the whole truth, Braith, and what you fear may not be real until you confront it.
Elara peered over the balcony, feeling the wind tug at her hair.
And what if the danger comes from within? She asked quietly. Kael turned to her, eyes glinting in the fading light. Then we face it together, always together. For a long moment, silence enveloped them. It was not empty. It was a silence charged with anticipation, with unspoken feelings and growing desire. Their hands brushed as Kael adjusted his cloak, and the touch was electric. Elara's pulse quickened, though she tried to hide it. Breath. You are changing me, Kael said finally, voice low. I am not easily changed, yet you stir something in me that I have long thought lost. Elara's heart ached with emotion she could not name. And you are changing me, she whispered. I see more, feel more because of you. But I am afraid. Afraid of the curse. Afraid of what may come. Kael reached for her hand, holding it firmly. Fear is not weakness. Fear is guidance. It shows us what matters most. And right now, you matter most to me. Before she could respond, a sharp cry rang from below. Both of them rushed down, the echo of urgency driving their steps. In the courtyard, a small group of intruders had returned, stronger, bolder, armed with weapons imbued with strange magic. The rival clan was testing them again, daring them to falter. Kale moved first, his speed and precision almost otherworldly. Alara followed, directing the estate guards with clarity and courage that impressed even him. Breath. Together they became a seamless unit, instinct and power blending with strategy and intelligence. Yet even in victory, there was a shadow of danger. Kale had been struck by a minor spell, one that burned with energy foreign to Alara's understanding. She rushed to his side, fear gripping her heart.
Kale!
He shook his head, brushing the pain aside. I am fine. But we must not linger. The clan will not stop. Alara's hands trembled, yet she helped him to the garden, tending to his minor wounds. In the soft glow of lanterns, their faces were close, their breaths mingling. The tension between them was undeniable, charged with emotions neither fully understood.
You should not be so reckless, Alara said softly.
Even with power, you are not invincible. Kale's gaze softened, a rare moment of vulnerability showing through the darkness, perhaps. But invincibility is not the goal.
Survival, trust, connection. These are the true strengths. And you have shown me both.
Alara felt her heart leap. Connection, trust, birth, and something deeper, something dangerous in its intensity. She looked into Kale's eyes and saw the reflection of her own desire and fear mirrored there. Yet the moment was broken by a sudden tremor, the air thickening with magic. A shadow moved across the garden, something unseen, yet powerful, malevolent. Alara instinctively reached for Kale, drawing him close.
The curse! Kale said, voice tight.
Bish, it is near. It tests us, tests what we care for most.
Alara's pulse raced.
She had known the warnings, felt the danger in the whispers of the estate, but facing it directly was terrifying. She held Kale's hand, squeezing it firmly. Then we face it. Together. The shadow swirled, taking a shape just beyond comprehension. It was neither fully solid nor fully empty, a presence that seemed to feed on fear and doubt. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between it and Alara, his aura flaring with power that made the very air hum. You will not harm her, he said, voice steady yet filled with fire. The shadow hesitated, as if recognizing the depth of his resolve. Then it retreated, dissolving into the night, leaving only the echo of its presence behind. Alara let out a trembling breath, gripping Kale's hand tightly. What was that? Kyle's gaze softened, a rare smile touching his lips. A warning, a reminder, perhaps. But test. We are not yet free of the darkness, but we are stronger together than apart.
In the quiet aftermath, they stood close, their foreheads almost touching, their hands intertwined.
The unspoken feelings between them had grown impossible to ignore. Alara felt the pull of something dangerous, thrilling, and undeniable, a connection that threatened to consume her as much as it saved her. And then, as if carried on the wind itself, the rival clan's warning reached them again, whispered through shadows and leaves. Your bond is fragile. Break it, and all will be lost. Des. Choose wrong, and the darkness will claim what you love most. Kale tightened his grip on her hand, his eyes burning with determination. Pat. I will not let that happen, he whispered. Not to you. Not to us. Alara's heart pounded. She understood now that their fight was not merely against rival clans, curses, or shadows. It was a test of trust, courage, and the strength of their bond. and the stakes were higher than either could fully imagine. As they watched the night deepen over Valdoria, the wind carrying whispers of secrets and threats yet unseen, both knew that the days ahead would challenge them in ways that went beyond skill or power. Their hearts were bound, their fates intertwined, and the veil of secrets surrounding them promised that the greatest trials were yet to come. The dance of power, desire, and destiny was far from over. The sky over Valdoria was a tapestry of gray and silver, clouds swirling like restless spirits above the kingdom. The wind carried the faint scent of rain and smoke, and the air seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Alara stood on the balcony of the estate, the first light of dawn illuminating her determined face. Kyle appeared beside her as silent and commanding as ever, his cloak rippling in the breeze. "The spirit stirs," he said, his voice low, filled with both warning and resolve. "It grows stronger. It senses our bond, and it will not relent until it tests us completely."
Alara nodded, her hands tightening around the balcony railing.
Breaths. "Then we must be ready," she said, "not just with skill, but with trust." "If this is the final test, I will face it with you." Kale's gaze softened, revealing a vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. "Right. You have given me strength," he admitted quietly. "I thought the curse had claimed my heart entirely, but you have reminded me that connection is possible, that choice is not lost. And now, I must choose to protect it." The words carried the weight of prophecy. Alara understood that this was no longer simply about survival or power. It was about redemption, the breaking of a centuries-old shadow and the possibility of freedom for both of them. They descended into the depths of the estate, into a chamber that Kale had kept secret. The walls were lined with ancient runes, glowing faintly with a power that seemed alive. In the center of the chamber lay a circle etched into the stone floor, dark veins pulsing like blood beneath the surface. "This is where the curse began," Kale said. "And this is where it can end. If we are strong enough, if we are brave enough, if we are united." Alara stepped into the circle beside him, feeling the hum of magic beneath her feet. It was both terrifying and exhilarating, a reminder that the world was far larger and far darker than she had ever imagined. "Then let us face it," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. The shadows in the room began to writhe and gather, coalescing into a form that was neither fully human nor fully empty. It was the spirit that had haunted the Marzani bloodline for generations, its presence filled with anger, betrayal, and the weight of centuries of grudges. Its eyes glowed with a light that burned through the dim chamber, fixing on Kale with accusation and hunger.
"You have lived too long in arrogance," the spirit said, its voice echoing as though from far away.
"You have allowed weakness and love to cloud judgment, and now you seek to defy me?" Kyle stepped forward, placing himself between the spirit and Alara. "I seek only to protect what matters," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "I choose loyalty. I choose courage. And I choose her." The spirit hesitated, as if sensing the truth in his words. Alara took his hand, feeling the pulse of his determination flow into her. Together, they formed a unity the curse had never anticipated. Two hearts intertwined, unbroken by fear or shadow. "Breaths," the spirit said, shifting its form to mirror Kale's own fears. The isolation, the pain, the loneliness that had haunted him for decades.
Only then can the curse be undone. Kale's eyes met Alara's, and in that instant, he understood.
He had always fought alone, relying on strength, fear, and precision. But true power, true freedom, came from trust, from connection, from allowing someone else into the heart he had believed forever locked. Alara squeezed his hand, her voice steady. You are not alone. Not now. Not ever. Kale inhaled deeply, letting the fear rise and flow through him without letting it control him. He closed his eyes, allowing the memory of every betrayal, every loss, every shadow that had bound him to the curse to surface. And then, with a single decisive act of will, he turned toward the spirit. I choose life, he said. I choose trust. I choose love. The circle of runes flared with light, the air humming with energy as the spirit roared, a sound that shook the chamber. Shadows twisted and turned, attempting to escape, but the force of Kale's choice, strengthened by Alara's courage and presence, held them in place. Alara stepped closer, chanting words she had learned from Kale, words that were ancient and powerful. She felt the magic respond to her, not as a tool, but as an extension of the bond they shared. Together they pushed against the darkness, their determination shining brighter than fear. The spirit shrieked, the chamber trembling with the intensity of its anger and the force of their resolve. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the shadows scattered, dissolving into the air like smoke caught in a breeze. The curse had been broken. Kale sank to his knees, exhausted but unbroken. Alara knelt beside him, holding his hand, feeling the weight of the moment settle around them. Kale felt the absence of the curse, not as relief alone, but as freedom. He could breathe, think, and feel without chains. You did it, he whispered, voice hoarse but filled with awe.
We did it! Alara smiled, her own heart racing.
We faced it. Together. They rose and the chamber seemed lighter, as though the shadows had not only departed but had left room for growth, hope, and life. The bond between them had transformed, no longer forged solely in fear and necessity, but in trust, courage, and choice. Days passed after the battle with the spirit, and the estate returned to a fragile calm. But the kingdom of Valdoria was alive with whispers of change. Rival clans watched cautiously, aware that the Mafia Heir had faced the darkness and survived. Not just survived, but transformed. Alara and Kale walked the gardens together, often in silence, often speaking in soft tones about plans, dreams, and possibilities twanked into sight. They no longer needed to test one another constantly. The trials had forged a trust deeper than any fear or shadow could undo. You have changed, Kale said one evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting the world in gold and violet. But yourself. But, yourself! You were clever before, brave before, but now you are something more. Alara laughed softly. I could say the same of you. I thought you were unapproachable, cold, untouchable. But you taught me what it means to trust, to endure, to choose what matters over fear. Kale's eyes softened, the shadows of his past finally lifting. And I learned that strength is not in standing alone. It is in allowing someone to stand beside you. And you have been beside me in ways I never imagined. Their hands found each other again, and this time there was no hesitation, no tension, only warmth and quiet certainty. They had faced darkness, conquered fear, and broken the curse that had haunted a lineage for generations. Yet, as always, Valdoria remained a kingdom of secrets, whispers, and power struggles. But now, Kale and Alara faced it together, their bond unbreakable, their hearts aligned. Whatever challenges the world placed before them, they knew they could endure. Not alone, but as equals, partners in every sense. Death. One evening, as the moon rose silver and full, Kale led Elara to the highest tower of the estate. Below them the kingdom lay quiet, but alive, shimmering with possibility. "You have claimed not only my loyalty," Kale said softly, voice carrying in the cool night air, "but my heart. And this time, between spirits, I am truly yours." Elara's breath caught, and she smiled, feeling a weight lift from her own chest. "Brace, and I am yours," she whispered, "not as a partner of duty, but as one of choice, of trust, of love." For a long moment they stood together, hands clasped, hearts beating in tandem, gazing at the world before them. The darkness that had once seemed inevitable now lay behind them, a shadow no longer capable of shaping their destiny. And yet, even as they stood in triumph, the wind whispered through the towers, carrying hints of challenges yet unseen. The world would always have shadows, always have trials, but Kale and Elara now understood the greatest truth. Together, they were stronger than any darkness, wiser than any threat, and braver than any fear. The night stretched on, serene and eternal in its quiet promise. And in that stillness both knew that the story was not merely one of curses and power. It was a story of redemption, of choice, and of hearts transformed by trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond of two souls who had chosen each other against all odds. The kingdom slept beneath them, unaware that its future rested not only in bloodlines and crowns, but in the hands and hearts of those who dared to face the darkness and survive it together. Bration. Elara looked at Kale one last time, and with a smile that held both relief and joy, whispered, "We are free now. And whatever comes next, we will face it as one." Kale's hand tightened over hers, a silent promise echoing louder than any words could convey. "As one," he said. And with that, the shadows that had haunted Valdoria faded completely, leaving only light, hope, and the enduring power of love, trust, and redemption.